They have long foretold the return of the mountain spirits. They have said that they would cleanse the desert, and that the weak would fall under the teeth of dogs. But they never foretold of this.
3D Realms. Wow, what a juggernaut, man. At one point, that dev was the absolute king of boomer shooters. Duke Nukem 3D was a massive success. It launched tons of spin-offs, got ported to tons of different platforms, and towards the end of the 90s, 3D Realms was riding high and looking to capitalize on the success of Duke Nukem 3D with a sequel, Forever, as well as developing a completely new game. And while it would take over a decade to see the sequel to Duke Nukem, we would see a new game under a contract by 3D Realms and developed by Human Head Studios in half that time. A game that would beat Duke Nukem Forever by almost every metric. A game not about some macho blonde-haired Hollywood action star adjacent protagonist, but a pissed-off Cherokee warrior who's about to rip some alien a new one.
We had no idea that we would become their prey.
Prey is a 2006 first-person shooter developed by Human Head Studios under contract by 3D Realms and published by 2K. In Prey, you play as Domasi Tommy Tawodi, a Cherokee mechanic and ex-soldier who wants to leave the reservation he lives on with his girlfriend Jen, even though she refuses. However, before he can really do anything about it, he, along with Jen and his grandfather, are abducted aboard an enormous alien spacecraft called the Sphere, where people are being harvested to feed the various alien creatures that live aboard. Thus, Tommy must escape the Sphere with his loved ones while fighting off aliens and embracing his cultural heritage in the process. Prey is, by far, one of the freshest and most interesting first-person shooters I have ever played, and it came out only in 2006. Not to be confused with the other Prey made by Arcade Studios, I still haven't played that one. It's a game that introduced a lot of elements that are pretty commonplace today. I mean, wall walking, sphere walking, non-Euclidean architecture, portals, gravity puzzles, you name it. Then it takes these very dense sci-fi elements and blends it with Native American mysticism, with things like spirit guides, spirit walking, and spiritual weapons. And you think that these things would be like oil and water. You think that they would not work. But then they totally do. So permit me then to take you on a journey through the Sphere and the land of the ancients as I talk about some of my favorite elements of Prey. Now, on the surface, Prey seems like a pretty typical first-person shooter with typical guns and enemies. It even has a wrench as a primary melee weapon, which we would see again in a game like BioShock only a year later. But the weapons in this game, they're interesting. You have the Hunter Rifle, which is a submachine gun whose alternate fire is a sniper rifle, whose scope is a tentacle that extends and attaches to your eye. Then you have something like the autocannon, that's a heavier machine gun with a grenade launcher attachment to it. You have the acid sprayer, which is essentially a shotgun. The crawler launcher, which is a rocket launcher as well as a shield. But probably my favorite gun is the leech gun, which leeches different energy sources that you find around the ship, and it offers you different kinds of fire. There's plasma, which is a lot like the plasma gun from Doom. There's frost, which freezes enemies. There's lightning, which shoots a bolt of electricity at enemies, and my favorite, the sunbeam. This has to be probably my favorite sound design for any laser cannon in any game I've ever played. Maybe only seconded by the Lasergewehr in Wolfenstein, the new Colossus. The guns are familiar, yet have an interesting twist on them to keep them fresh. Plus, they all have some weird biomechanical feature to them that sets them apart from other standard weapons in first-person shooters. Plus, on top of this, the game has some very interesting mechanics. You travel through a lot of the sphere through doors, portals, non-Euclidean openings, and boxes and walls. You're going to be walking up walls, ceilings, reorienting rooms so you're standing on the walls or ceilings. It all aids in presenting the sphere as this very large, nonsensical, labyrinthian structure that could easily belong to a work of H.P. Lovecraft or something. Like, seriously, how would you even make a map of this place? Finally, on top of all these space-bending features, you add spirit walking, where Tommy can leave his body to walk through force fields, fire, plasma, and walking onto invisible bridges, as well as use it to sneak up on enemies and get them with your spirit bow. It's a very cool mechanic, and it makes for some really interesting puzzle solving and ways to break up the more action-oriented gameplay. On top of this, the game is complemented by an amazing atmosphere. This game was made in id Tech 4, which is the same engine as Doom 3 and Quake 4, but it is good at rendering very shiny metallic hallways and doors, as well as blending in these gross, organic portions of the sphere as well. There's still portions of the game that are also very dimly lit, for which you can use a lighter, but most of the game isn't as dark as something like Doom 3. I mean, I've played that game and I could barely see anything without a flashlight throughout it. What I especially like is the stark contrast between the sphere and the Land of the Ancients. The Land of the Ancients truly feels like a calming place. It's so well lit, and it's the only place in the game where you can see the sky, and it's almost always blue. Additionally, the soundtrack to this game is phenomenal. It was composed by brothers Jeremy and Julian Soule, both of which have composed music for many games in the past. Jeremy Soule, in particular, being a legend in the industry, having composed music for the Elder Scrolls series, as well as Pajama Sam, Putt Putt, and Spy Fox? I love this guy. But that aside, Prey is a blend of licensed music and this amazing, very sweeping soundtrack. It almost feels like something out of Elder Scrolls, except I can't play Prey on my refrigerator. Trust me, I tried. Finally, I want to touch on the themes and narrative of Prey. At this point, I think it's fairly obvious that the aliens in Prey, the hunters, the keepers, all of them, they're a very clear allegory for colonists. And I hope I'm not the only one in thinking that, because I've seen many videos on Prey 2006, but almost none of them have touched on this topic. And I don't know why. It's clear as day. I mean, the hunters and creatures aboard the sphere, they invade unsuspecting planets, capture and kill innocent people that just happen to be living there, and they claim that they have ownership of these people, that the people that they take up and abduct and eat, they belong to them.
Were it not for us, your species would never have existed. You were created only to be consumed. We own you.
Put a pin in that last part because I want to go back to it later. And I could go on. I mean, the creatures of the sphere represent a deep, unrelenting cruelty that, unfortunately, can be reflected in real events. I'm not going to claim that I know anything about the suffering and hardships that indigenous people have endured because I'm not indigenous. I mean, I'm not even technically human. I'm a gorilla. And I encourage you to hear the stories and accounts from the actual people that endured these hardships. But the reason I bring all this up, this allegory, is because Tommy has struggled with accepting his Cherokee heritage. And that fact is central to the narrative of Prey.
Listen, Tommy. You cannot turn your back on your heritage any longer. It will give you strength.
Strength? For what?
To save yourself. To survive.
What could be a greater antithesis to the Cherokee heritage that Tommy has than these cruel alien invaders coming in and trying to destroy it? What I find interesting is that in an interview about Prey, former Human Head Studios business development manager Tim Gerritsen said,
"When we announced that our main character was American Indian, some people automatically assumed that we'd portray him in a comic book fashion. Others derided us because they didn't feel that they could identify with an American Indian. It didn't fit in with their personal experiences."
Now, the former portion I could understand. Indigenous people have not been portrayed very well in media for many, many years. They've often played villains or savages or very one-dimensional characters, which I'm glad the writers of Prey decided to flesh out Tommy and not reduce him to a stereotype.
What are you looking at? Real tough guy. Can't even tell her you love her. I gotta get off this damn reservation. If she'd just come with me, it'd all be different. It'd all be... Listen to yourself. Who do you think you're kidding?
But not being able to relate to him? Not being able to identify with him merely because he's Cherokee. It's amazing to think that after all these years, gamers still haven't changed. I find Tommy to be one of the most compelling characters. He loves his girlfriend Jen and his grandfather, but he's still hesitant to fully embrace his culture and heritage. Him going by Tommy itself being a representation of that. His name Domasi is the Cherokee version of the name Thomas, but he doesn't want to go by Domasi. He wants to go by the English name, only to find out that he can find strength and resolve in that culture and heritage in the midst of adversity. You cannot die in this game. You just fight on and endure. Even after losing everything, even having had your grandfather killed and consumed by aliens, even after fighting the demonic apparitions of children, even after having to kill your own girlfriend to free her from a hellish existence as some alien beast, Tommy endures because of the power of his soul. What I think differentiates Tommy from other indigenous protagonists in video games like Turok is that Talset's connection to being indigenous really isn't that integral to his character. He is indigenous, yes, but if you remove that aspect, I think Turok's character wouldn't really change all that much as a result. In order for Prey's narrative to work, I feel Tommy's Cherokee background is key. I couldn't imagine Tommy being played by Duke Nukem. Duke's really a reflection of American individualism, while Tommy is strengthened by his people and heritage. And that way I find him to be much more sympathetic than some guy that says he has metallic spheres in his pants. But Ape of the Hour, I can't relate with some indigenous guy. I have differing experiences that... So you're telling me that you can't relate to a guy that has endured unbelievable hardship, fighting off threats of invaders, and given the choice of either gaining ultimate power by sacrificing the people of Earth, the people he loves, the people he belongs to, he chooses to hurl the whole hellacious pile of malicious flesh and metal responsible for perpetuating human suffering into the flames of the sun? You can't relate with that? Well, I think that... Now, to what I was talking about earlier. Remember when I said that the Keepers claim that they seeded life on Earth and that human beings belong to them? Tommy has a response back to it. And Tommy's response to this is probably my favorite line in the entire game, and one that sums up the core themes very well. And it's not some tacky one-liner, it's not some reference to They Live or The Terminator, it's not some snotty Joss Whedon-esque quip. It's this.
I am a warrior of the Cherokee Nation. Nobody owns me.